Welcome to Learning Life Skills Together. This is our weekly community Zoom meeting where our guests help us to go deeper into the 4 life skills and open up a huge array of chances to practice them. Good afternoon and welcome to Zoom meeting number 17 with Frankie Boomsma. And Frankie is in Italy at the moment, and so that is the reason for our early time today. So we're looking forward to talking about digital well-being for us and our kids. And it's a topic that I have long wanted to bring in and now finally found the person to do it for us, to get us started on talking about these things. So as always, we begin with a practice. And so we're going to ask Frankie to bring us a practice to help us to settle in for this discussion. So, Frankie, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Don, and thank you everyone who is listening. It's exciting to be here today, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So, as Don suggested, we'll begin with a short practice just to settle into this space together, our time together, and hopefully bring a mindful approach. So, for all of those who are listening or watching, I'd like to invite you now just to take a couple deep breaths. Settle into the body. You can rest your eyes open or closed, whatever feels comfortable for you. And just taking a moment to notice the stillness, the silence, and bringing ourselves to this present moment. You may set the intention to have an open mind and an open attitude to whatever arises throughout our conversation. And since we'll be talking about a subject that can often elicit some emotions, we'll give ourselves a break from feeling guilty, afraid, panicked, or overwhelmed as parents in this conversation about media and screen time. So letting go of that emotion that we may hold on to and just softening around it. Reminding ourselves that as parents and as people, we do the best we can with the tools that we have at hand. And we offer ourselves compassion, kindness, and understanding. And with a few deep breaths, we can close our practice.
Okay, thank you so much, Frankie, for that. I, for one, appreciated the space that's created now here. Sort of a step back from all that's happening in the middle of the day for me,
Mm,
and your invitation to maybe be a little open and a little kind and gentle around this kind of a loaded topic.
mm,
It's a topic that, as you suggested, has some guilt around it for parents. What should I be doing? How should I be handling this? And that was very much on my mind as we were developing this whole program. That the digital lives of parents and children are part of the background of the whole thing, and sometimes part of the foreground,
mm.
right up in our faces.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the chance to go into this a little bit in this kind of gentle way
Mm,
that you and I have talked a little bit about. So
absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about you, because I didn't say much other than your name, and that you happen to be in Italy, and you also happen to be from originally Lancaster, Pennsylvania,
That's
and
right.
probably not unsurprisingly, your mom is a graduate of Westchester University. So
My brother
Oh,
is a
your brother,
graduate.
brother, not
Yeah.
mother. Okay, your
Yep.
brother is a graduate
Yep.
of
So we keep
Westchester.
it local.
Yes, yes, indeed. So I wanted folks to have that sense that you're not coming at this entirely from a European perspective, but that
Mm,
there's a sense of being right here in Pennsylvania.
mhm,
And the fact that you've worked as a teacher, and so
mm,
that's part of your background, and that your bachelor's degree is in public health, and that your master's in science is in mindfulness, from Aberdeen University in Scotland. So you're moving things around a little bit,
mhm.
and
Yeah, a
yeah,
little all over the place,
yeah.
but yeah, so I
But
would,
useful perspectives for us, I do believe.
yeah,
And so
um,
your dissertation, which is how I kind of got to know you, is in this sense of how is it when we pay attention, and what do our practices of attention and awareness bring to the idea of digital well-being. So
mm,
so I think that's a really great place to be starting out on this discussion with.
mhm.
So maybe you could talk to us just a little bit in introduction to this whole thing. I mean, I think the meditation helped us. And what
Yeah.
else what else might you want to say?
Sure. Thanks, Don. I mean, just to kind of add to the points that you gave about my background, full disclosure, I am not a parent, but I have worked as a school teacher, as you've said, as you've stated. So I do feel like I have some um, clout. I have had some experience with school children, and um, my background in mindfulness has brought me to this conversation about digital well-being. And like you said, the practice to start off our conversation, I think was really important to just reframe our attitudes about this conversation. As parents, we are really inundated with a lot of alarming statistics and news about what screen time, what media is doing to our children. And it's so completely understandable that we kind of have this consistent panic and fear around the conversation. So I think bringing a different attitude and kind of softening around that and reminding ourselves that there are so many opportunities in this landscape as well. Of course, there are, the things to watch out for, the really dangerous and concerning things, but we also can focus on the opportunities here. So my research with my mindfulness degree was exactly in this digital well-being and the implication of mindfulness practice, which we can also call moment-to-moment attention practice, can influence our perceived ability to regulate our digital use. So we're tapping into all of the ideas of like choice making, autonomy, free will. And, this is a conversation that maybe as adults we take for granted, but it's certainly a skill that in this conversation of digital use, we can be teaching our children.
Yeah. So one of the perspectives that we take is that in learning life skills together, the parents are polishing up their skills and then sharing them with the kids. And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what kinds of skills we might be practicing as the grown-ups, working with digital
Yeah,
media.
absolutely. Well, I mean, it's obviously, I guess, implied that we model behavior for our children. And so they, see us as an example. So just as our practices influence them, we can really consider what we're doing as a powerful source of attention for them. So, as on a really practical level, showing our
Yeah.
children healthy digital skills, how much screen time we use, what content we consume, they really watch out for that.
Mm.
I think in this conversation, it's also important to adjust for age. So when we're talking about a teenager, it's very different from talking to a 3-year-old. Um, some of the skills that I try or some of the tips rather, that I try and promote in some of the workshops that I organize are to focus on with young children, really trying to be a part of the experience of screen time with them. So co-viewing, kind of being involved if possible, because obviously I understand in the conversation of time and money as a resource, not everybody has that ability to be around their child 24/7, monitoring and tracking. But again, as we said in the practice, we do the best we can. We take this as a rule of thumb and we try and apply it as a parent to a younger child, right? So co-viewing is a tip that I think really goes a long way. All of the experts kind of across the board really suggest if you can be involved in the experience of screen time rather than it being an isolated kind of experience, then that's a really useful practice.
Yeah. So this is with the littles. Yeah.
Yeah, the little guys. um, and obviously, the conversation changes, like I said, when you get to early adolescence and teenage. And this is where
Yeah.
you can start really applying the critical thinking skills. And this is where the mindfulness practice can really come in. So, promoting these thinking skills that allow us to develop choice and understand what content am I going to, how much screen time am I consuming, pushing our children to really self-examine, obviously in a maybe simplified way and adjusted
Yeah.
for the children that we know, but asking those questions, why am I using this device right now? Or is there, what are the benefits of what I'm doing? Am I being mindful about the time I'm spending? How do I feel? How do I feel in my body? How do I feel in my heart and mind. And so really engaging them on that level of thinking, that directly translates as, okay, I have power, I have control over this ability. It's not
Yeah.
something I'm running away with. I'm not letting it get the best of me.
Yeah. And so this is one of the things that we talk about in all kinds of situations is that the parents can not only model but sort of narrate what they're doing.
Mm,
Talk about the decisions that they're making, talk about the things that they're noticing about themselves once we're sort of in that moment where we're paying attention. We've chosen to pay attention now to what we're doing. So
mhm,
I think often we find ourselves with our phone in our hand looking at something and we haven't actually made a decision about
mm,
it. Right? Yeah.
mhm,
Yeah. And so to sort of demonstrate that we can actually make choices around it rather than just be driven by
mm.
those habits. Yeah.
And Don, just like with anything that can stray towards maybe a more damaging habit, we can also develop resilience. I, for one,
Hmm.
know that when I am doom scrolling and I'm on my screen and I don't feel good,
Yeah.
I can either spiral in a way where, okay, I'm just going to continue down that road, or I can bounce back and say, that's okay. I can do better tomorrow, or I'll do better in an hour. And I think that that's also
Yeah.
a really critical skill that we can both
Yeah.
model and teach.
Yeah, and so somehow to find a moment in which that's actually happening for us and just demonstrate it out loud, let it happen in the room.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, great.
And like we said, from the beginning, the recurring theme here is mindfulness. And
Yeah,
in the practice of mindfulness, obviously, we have the word practice. It's something that we have to create a routine around. It's something that we have to nurture and strengthen as a muscle. And so it can start in small ways. And just like any habit, we kind of build on that. And pretty soon it translates as an approach, a way of living. And
yeah,
many people turn to mindfulness practice for other reasons in their lives, emotional awareness or awareness about their mental state. But this specific realm of digital use is, I think, really profound, the application of mindfulness.
yeah, yeah. And so we talked a little bit about the littles and a little bit about the sort of tweens, as we're thinking of the younger adolescents. So how about for older adolescents? What are you thinking there? Or how are you teaching there?
Yeah, I mean, it's
Nowadays?
always a little bit harder because you're dealing with a different set of needs with adolescents.
Yeah.
There's a tendency for parents to want to implement rules, which I think is totally valid. It's up to you as a parent what you want to apply. Um, but if, the child is mature enough, it could be useful to involve them in setting the rules. So maybe discuss the reasons why you're setting rules and really like solicit their input so that
Hmm.
they can feel a sense of ownership and understanding over why these rules are being set. Um, and it's also really important, I think, to consider tone. We tend to associate we tend as parents maybe to get really upset and panicky and angry when we have to berate children over so much screen time, and so there's a real negative association that's
Hmm. Yeah.
designed. And there's this effect called the forbidden fruit effect, which is when something is prohibited or stigmatized, it leads to this increased perceived desirability around it. So it
Ah.
might have this kind of alternate effect if we create this um, negative association with screens and use, especially teens and adolescents who kind of want to push the boundaries, rebel a little bit. They might want to do that more. So as parents, we might want to shift our tone and, without sounding patronizing, taking a breath and calming our emotions before we, have a
Ah.
conversation about what the rules are. around screen usage.
Yeah. So this is the same approach that we're talking about in like everything that we're doing in this program is to be able to do that stop procedure, to put that pause in, to step back, to take a breath and see what's going on with the kid actually.
Mm,
I think sometimes, especially around these kinds of loaded situations, we come in with assumptions, we come in with stuff we've heard in the media, and we just immediately dump rather than say, what's up with my kid? What's my kid
mm,
doing specifically, and
mm,
how might we work this out if I'm concerned, you know? And so
mhm.
so I think that's a really helpful thing to point out, is that it is that stepping back and seeing the situation for what it is, rather than rather than
Absolutely.
rather than what we think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because we also have to widen, I think, our perspective a bit and remind ourselves that, of course, maybe in the conversation with adolescents, they're on social media and they're engaging in a lot of social activities using their devices, but it's also recreational, which is a positive thing in developing our sense of self and identity. We need that as humans. And it's also
Yeah.
educational. There are so many opportunities with media that are really pushing us forward. And I'd like to remind, everyone and myself that throughout history, any kind of technological advancement has been seen with a lot of pushback, whether it's TV or the cell phone, or even going back to the invention of writing. So this is kind of a
Right.
natural proclivity of humans, and we can kind of work with that tension and relax around it and remind ourselves that, of course, we're talking about a landscape that's scary. There's pornography on the internet, there's grooming, there's a lot of um, violence, there's a lot of difficult situations that kids can be exposed to, but there
Yeah.
are also so many other opportunities to make
Yeah.
media content.
Yeah. So one of the things about this program, the Learning Life Skills, is that we're taking that longer term approach, right? So yes, we need to do these things, sort of as they come up, as we work them. And there's also the sense that we're building these skills through practice over time. And so it may not be that we come in, say, okay, do this, and that's settled, and on it goes. It's like we
Mm,
need to keep returning to these things in the way that they require in that moment, you know,
mm,
in that moment of our child's growth.
mm,
So I love that you're bringing in, okay, well, with the littles it's like this, and sort of in between they're getting more access, and we need to think about it this way. So I'm wondering if you
mhm.
if you if you might take it to sort of the next level with that, and talk about some of the things that experts like yourself in digital wellness are thinking for those sort of specific age groups.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you suggested, there are so many experts in the field right now, and I've put together kind of a list compiling what are some general guidelines. And I'd just like to reiterate that, we're having this conversation and we're trying to open the audience. And so it's um, understandable if we're working with limited resources. We have extremely demanding lives, busy lives, we're working jobs where we don't always have the time or the money to spend on an application that tracks or monitors our phone. That's okay. Do the best with what we can. So I just wanted to say that again. That's kind of the driving theme, I think, of what I wanted to, how I wanted to reach our audience. But anyway, so if we're moving through the age groups, and we're starting with toddlers, so ages 2 and under, really no screen time is recommended, except for maybe
Mhm.
video chatting with family or friends. Children obviously at this stage are exploring the world and they need to learn the
Mm,
world through
yeah.
very tangible means.
Yeah.
If screen time is allowed, it should be limited to very high quality educational content. Like I said before, co-viewed with a caregiver, or, if you don't have a caregiver in the area, even a sibling or a friend. But this co-viewing is really important to promoting interaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Hear that idea of the child needs to be not just in the screen, but in the 3D world
Mm,
around them, and another person is really the best
yeah.
way of doing that. Yeah. Thanks. Okay.
So then we move to preschoolers, so ages 3 to 5. And again, here we have very limited screen time to no more than maybe 1 hour a day of high quality, again, educational content, co-viewing to help them understand what they're watching and how to apply it to the world around them. um, School age children, so 6 to 12, this is when we can maybe start to establish some consistent limits on screen time that, again, balance educational, but also introduce recreational and social activities. Children are growing up a lot younger. I remember in my school experience working with 8, 9-year-olds who had cell phones. That might sound alarming, but that's just the way it is. That's the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Indeed.
Um, but yes, so with school age children, really also encouraging children to prioritize their offline activities such as homework, hobbies, physical activities.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's actually one of the things that, as I said, we've been thinking about sort of digital wellness the whole time, and it's taken us 17 weeks to talk
Mm,
about it since we started. But the ideas that we're putting forth of let's practice these skills in particular um, situations, right? Or during particular activities. So the first one that we ever talked about was going for a walk. So it's like that's actually a time to put the screen away and
mm,
and be together in the 3D world, right?
mm,
And then the next thing is to now is to experience beauty and awe. And yes, we can do that on a screen, you
mm,
know, and there's lots of other ways of doing it as well. So it sort of gives you a chance to say, yeah, let's look at this picture or let's see this video of squirrels or what depending on what you're talking about and what you're doing so that it becomes part of uh, a, a larger story, a larger way of thinking and learning, right?
mm.
So that the kids sort of get that. Again, it's the whole modeling thing, right? That this is we're sharing the skill. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think
Cool.
there's no denying that really promoting um, being outdoors and building that into the value system of our family, and what is important is very useful. I understand that if a parent tries to push that and they get pushback from their child, like, no, I'd rather be on my screen, that can be really frustrating. So I think at
Yeah.
that point, you can move into more of a, let me provide information to my child. So why could it be important to be outside? Why is it important to balance being on our phones, being on our devices with different
Yeah.
activities? And even if that doesn't land, even if your child again is frustrated and is like, I'm not listening to you, that's okay. We provided the information, and at some point, they'll be able to grow and mature and internalize that message. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, this is the thing. And you said it right at the start, our practice of attention, our practice of mindfulness is a practice. And so all of these things are like ongoing. We need to, it's not like one and done with
Mhm.
any of these conversations, even the conversations around how we use digital media need to be ongoing. Yeah. And kind of, what's the word I want? Flexible, movable.
Yeah, and I think with that flexibility, Don, comes a really important pillar of mindfulness practice, which is noticing the judging kind of attitude. As parents who only want the best for our children,
Yeah.
we judge ourselves based on, what we can provide or not provide. And again, if you're a working parent who does not have the time and energy to be applying these skills, that voice can be very harsh and critical. And so giving
Yeah.
ourselves a break from that and allowing ourselves to just kind of embrace the chaos, not to sound, reductive, but also to say, I am doing the best I can. I can take these skills and apply them in moments that I find available.
Yeah.
I can't do it all, and I can't solve this from one day to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really an important point. Thanks. So, okay.
There are a lot of resources out there for parents, and one of the things that, apart from giving these practical tips of co-viewing and of promoting these kind of critical thinking skills, I really recommend that parents get involved with other parents and really support like community and engagement around this, because
Mm,
it doesn't have to be an isolated experience of feeling
yeah.
as a parent that I'm the only one dealing with this. You are absolutely not. Every parent around the world is dealing with this. So, Facebook groups are very helpful in finding community. But even community as simple as, your children's friend at school, your children's friends' parents at school, or somebody you come across in a public
Yeah.
library, or anybody, and having a conversation with them, it can be really liberating, relieving to just kind of
Yeah.
connect with other parents
Yeah.
about this.
So you have done workshops, you've given workshops on this. Eh, are there things that come up again and again and solutions that come up again and again as
Mm.
as you talk with the folks who are attending?
I was working with mostly adolescent age, so 12 to 14,
Oh, okay.
to do like small group workshops where we did a lot of activities, role play, and games
Hmm.
to kind of discuss big themes about privacy, security, online citizenship, which is the idea of acting in a principled, ethical way online. And honestly, what surprised me was just how trustworthy these children were, how I
Hmm.
think they do receive a lot of information about this, and they're putting together these skills, and we can remind ourselves that we can trust our children with knowing what is right
Hmm.
from wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that was a really nice takeaway. Um, Something else that, came up during workshops, and I think is important to remember that as you're growing and learning, you're doing a lot of exploring, and exploring about yourself, exploring about others in the world, and maybe about topics that you don't necessarily want to go to your parents about or to others about.
Hmm.
And just as just like in the past, if someone were to go to the library, secretly to find a book to learn about a topic, children are doing that now on the internet. And again, even though the landscape is vastly different and there are a lot of things to be concerned about, it's a very important place for that kind of exploratory practice, learning about
Yeah.
puberty or learning about, you know, yourself in a different way.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
came up often during conversations with these children
Hmm.
too.
Hmm. So the self-guided nature of this, as you say, it's sort of in the past you might have gone to the library and just rooted around. And so there's a rooting around sense of this exploration. Yeah. So I wonder sort of how, if we're thinking about this sort of over time, so that we're not just saying, okay, well, here's my 3-year-old, here's what I'm going to do. And then here's my 6-year-old, and here's what I'm going to do. It's like your 3-year-old is going to be your 6-year-old, and they're going to have what they've practiced and what you've practiced with them. And really, so much of this stuff is so new that I'm not sure how much of a chance we've had with anybody to do that over time. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about, since you're seeing kids sort of who have grown up with these media, and have had the chance to maybe from very young explore what's that like, what's the growth like in people's use of media, particularly young people's use of media.
I think it's a hard conversation because the media world is changing constantly.
Yeah, that's
And
yeah, that's what I'm thinking about.
it's
Yeah.
always in flux. I mean, TikTok is popular now for young people, but it's probably going to be different just in 2 or 3 years. There's probably going to be the next big thing. I think as
Right,
parents,
right.
again, it's really hard to feel like we can keep up to date, but maybe trying that in our practice to be a little bit more
Mm,
vigilant about what the landscape looks like. You
yeah.
know what TikTok like means or what it is.
No,
And
seriously. Yeah.
yeah.
Because we don't get that chance to have an arc of growth through it, because
Mhm.
it's changing all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But again, there are so many resources out there, one of which is a website that I really recommend parents check out. It's called Common Sense Media. And there's a community of people who bring together tips and practices and updated kind of information about what
Mm,
is out there. So if
yeah.
you're feeling a little lost with, I can't keep up, you know, turn to this website. I'm sure there's so many out there similar to it, but it's commonsensemedia.org.
Okay. And so this, just tuning into something like that on a regular basis might be a way of saying, oh, well, here's the next coming thing. Here's what the kids are probably involved in that I don't know about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
I mean, I think that part, as you were saying, I think that part is really important, is to be able to sort of know what's going on.
mm-hmm,
You know, my um perspective is of a very long time frame, as you can tell from the color
mm-hmm,
of my hair. So I understand that I am lost sometimes in
mm-hmm,
understanding what's going on, and I'm not a parent of a young person anymore. I'm a parent of an old person. Uh, and so I don't have those worries. But yeah,
mm-hmm,
I understand how you're going to need to stay on top of it as your child grows and ages, so that you're tracking along with them and understanding. So, I mean, the what you were saying about um, viewing and co-experiencing, being together with it, I think is really a profound thing.
mm-hmm,
For the young kids, to be literally with them, but for the older kids to be co-experiencing, to know what TikTok looks like, to know the geography of something like that, if that's what your
mm-hmm,
kids are into.
mm-hmm.
Because you may have missed that entirely in your experience.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And fortunately, I think we're having more of a conversation around policy and regulatory action around these
yeah.
platforms and applications. And so as time moves on and we see more trends, we see more novelty, there will follow a strong regulatory body. So, for
Yeah.
example, on YouTube, YouTube has been around for a long time, but there is a
Yeah.
YouTube Kids version, which is more of a supervised, controlled environment you can set. And so hopefully this will continue and there will be versions that are, safer and that we feel we have more choice and control over.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah, I
what
feel like the biggest takeaways really from today are um, as a parent, um, being mindful about our approach and our attitude towards this
hmm
conversation, giving ourselves a break, meeting ourselves where we are, doing the best we can with what we have. When children are young, trying to really be promoting the co-viewing. And if you can't do that specifically, then again, maybe push a sibling or a friend to try and get involved.
Right.
Um, and then as children get older, you can start to have more mature conversations around critical thinking. So asking questions that help strengthen this kind of autonomy, the sense of control and ownership over
Yeah.
our devices.
Yeah. Would you have a couple of those questions that you might plant in parents' minds, if you're trying to spur that kind of critical thinking about, use of media? Would you?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we can really tap into like the body, the felt sense, and ask, how are you feeling when you're consuming
Mm,
content? If we're scrolling for hours and hours, we might start to feel a headache or eye strain. So can you become aware of that? Is that a sign for you that maybe you should stop doing that?
mm,
Asking these questions and allowing children to arrive at their own answers.
yeah,
As we get older, we can start to have more mature questions. So, how reliable is the information or the content that I'm consuming? Can I trust it? Can I have more of a critical lens? And I'm suggesting these questions, but you can literally ask these questions.
yeah.
Again,
No,
your
that's
children
yeah,
might roll their eyes, they might say, "Oh, whatever," but have faith that they heard you, that they will,
yeah,
consider what you said.
yeah.
Mhm.
No, I particularly like the one of like, how do you feel right now? 'Cause this is completely um in the vein of what we've been doing for of these weeks now, and in the modules that we have posted of the course, is to pay attention to what's happening around us and pay attention to the effect that it has on us
Mm,
inside, how it feels in our body, how it feels in our emotions, what's happening in our mind,
mm,
to do that. And so that's a really fascinating question, I think, for the older kids and for the younger kids. Okay, I've seen you scrolling there for 25
yeah,
minutes now. How are you feeling? What's going on? Because it kind
absolutely.
of it breaks in, it changes things, and it brings that new perspective.
Mm.
Because
And developing body
yeah,
awareness is important
yeah,
as is, but
really
especially when we're
important.
when we're talking about this. And you made a good point about like developing awareness of our internal state and as well as our external state. So it could also be useful to ask the question, how does the time I spend on my device impact my relationships with other people, with my family, with my
Mm,
friends? Um,
yeah,
and that could, lead to some interesting
that's
kind
a
of
yeah.
insight.
Yeah, yeah. And as with all of the stuff that we're doing and learning life skills together, we're not saying, parents, you need to sit down for an hour and button yourself up and have a discussion. It's like this is a 5 minute thing,
Mm,
that comes up in the day,
mhm,
or that comes up while you're trying to go for that walk and the kid has the phone.
mhm,
the entire time. So
mhm.
wait, let's just check in for a minute. you know.
Hmm.
It's kind of that's our constant thing that we do is to just check in.
Hmm.
How is it with me right now? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I love that. I love your questions. They're perfect for that kind of just get in there, get a little bit done,
Hmm.
and then go on with life, because
Hmm.
that's what it's all about. It doesn't, none of this stuff has to be huge because we have,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Just
we
like
have,
with anything, if we see the mountain that we have to climb, and just see the big picture, it's overwhelming. So we can
yeah,
take little steps and feel, the successes of, okay, I had a check-in with my child and I posed this question, or you know,
yeah,
I did this co-viewing together. That's great. Pat
and
yourself on the back, acknowledge, affirm that you
yeah,
are committed, you're involved.
yeah, and just let it work. Wonderful. Well, this has been a great conversation, even though it's online. Not even though it's online. It's been a great conversation. And so I hope that we have broached this subject, started out talking about digital wellness, and that we can do more sort of as we move along through the program. Because right now we're talking about attention. Mostly we're moving into emotion regulation. And, coming up, we're going to be talking and sharing more about what it's like to get through really hard times,
Mm,
what we need, what kind, you talked about the word resilience, that's one way of thinking about it. So what makes us resilient? How can we offer that and help our kids to get there? And the
mm,
last thing is belonging. And,
mm,
and, s- and so, which was something that you talked about a lot, really, is how do we get connected? Because often our screens sort of come between us. So how do we get reconnected in that way? So I think there's a lot of ways that digital wellness comes into all of those skills.
mhm.
So I guess what I'm saying is, I'd love to have you back to talk about this stuff, maybe in some more pointed ways with,
Yeah, of course.
emotion regulation and the
Mm,
emotionality of these things. So wonderful. Well, I always ask if my guest has one word of wisdom for us.
one word.
Well, it doesn't have to be a word. It's, a word of wisdom, a sentence or so.
Mm,
Something we can remember. Something
hmm. Maybe choice making.
choice making. Okay. All right. Yes, that's what it is all about. It's
That's what it's
about
all about.
when we're paying attention, we can make choices. When we're not,
Mm,
we can't, right? So
absolutely.
right there to our attention practice. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Frankie. I've really enjoyed this. I'm glad that we're talking about this subject
Yeah,
all
thank
together.
you. And thank you
Yeah.
to everyone who's listened.
All righty.